Hello, and thank you for joining our presentation, Finding an Edge with Data at Scale. My name is Unrue. I'm going to be talking to you today about a little bit about who Tech Data are and what we do, and how we have all this data, a bit about who I am and how Tech Data are just a few examples of how we're finding our competitive edge or efficiencies within our organization leveraging data and AI. A bit about Tech Data. So we're a global distributor. Effectively, we'll come on to what that means in more detail, but effectively we are serving approximately 115,000 resellers. That's not end customers. That's resellers each with 10,000 customers of their own, and everything in between, across a portfolio of 150,000 products across 100 plus countries. So as you can well imagine, we've got a good sample size of what the market is doing in terms of its spend around technology, and we have lots of transactions. So a highly transactional business, obviously with the personal touch and every piece of value we add along the way. And my name is Unrue. I'm our European Chief Technologist. So I'm not internal facing. I support our sales business in evaluating new technologies and technology suppliers to really look at new technologies we should be focusing on, technology suppliers that can support our go-to-market, and trying to make sure that we can make that technology as consumable as possible by developing repeatable solutions where appropriate. So this is really tailoring combinations of technologies to meet certain line of business outcomes and objectives to really help remove friction within the sale for our resellers, so they can really get straight to the point around what the technology will do for them, and hopefully accelerate the sales motion. As you can well imagine, I also support our go-to-market technology strategy within Europe, and also participate in some of those global activities, just making sure that we're on point in terms of understanding where the opportunity is and where it's moving, and making sure that we have the right portfolio of suppliers and skills and marketing and sales approach and all these kind of good things to address that. So supporting those teams that are involved there. And as you can tell, I like to talk, so technical evangelism is another thing that I do. I get thrown in front of groups of people to talk about the great things that technology can do for them. So from a Tech Data perspective, our strategic focus really kind of speaks to, I suppose, the theme of the Data Innovation Summit. We are investing in next generation technologies. We're not just selling the stuff, we're consuming it with a view to creating new and innovative ways of delivering technology solutions to our channel, simplifying the way they consume it, and better ways of interacting with our customers, more responsive and more enriched, all these kinds of good things. Strengthening our end-to-end portfolio, so looking at new cross-sell opportunities where we combine different technologies, different products, enhanced products with services to really offer an end-to-end experience of selling solutions for the channel, which is something that we feel is important. And obviously, as is everybody here, I'm sure, we are on that digital transformation journey. So we have a strong focus and a strong investment around transforming ourselves digitally to be a data-driven company and have all the automations we need in the right places, the appropriate places. And of course, we optimize our global footprint wherever appropriate. So as mentioned, we work across 100 plus country markets across North America, South America, Asia Pac, Europe. And we do our best to make sure that we leverage those economies of scale and that we learn from each other's best practices and we learn from the data. And then, of course, as every good company does, we execute locally based on our local expertise. So what does a distributor do? Fundamentally, when a technology company reaches a certain size and they want to reach a bigger certain size, a few ways of doing that. They can either pay for a large sales force to find more customers, or they can engage with a community of resellers to expand their reach to more customers indirectly, or they can come to a distributor who has all the experience and all the setup and all the skills and all the tools in place plus an addressable market of thousands of resellers. So they work with distribution to get that market reach, and fundamentally we act as an extension of them in executing their go-to-market strategy and their vision by extending their sales and marketing capacity and capability, bringing our best practices to bear, and also in many cases extending on their credit and logistics capability. And adversely, on the flip side to that, we are enabling all those resellers that I spoke about before to become competent sellers in these technologies which we make available to them. Then that's through training, and that's through marketing support and sales support and technical expertise that get brought to bear on specific opportunities and the likes. So that's what we do in a nutshell. In terms of how we are leveraging data to really move the needle for us, I wanted to pick a few use cases. We don't have much time here, it's a 20-minute slot, but I thought the key areas to address would really be growth. So how are we using data to impact our ability to grow at the least cost possible? How are we using it to make sure that we're not undermining all that great customer value and relationship that we have with an inefficient machine, and how do we maintain that well-oiled machine in the background with efficient operations? And then retention. So obviously we've grown, we've acquired customers, we manage those customers. How do we make sure we've got good visibility of how to retain those customers and where customers might be churning and why, and how can we impact that to retain those customers? So, growth. The challenge was set to identify and predict potential areas of opportunity and growth based on empirical data and empirical evidence. So what did we do? We acquired an organization called IQBlade back in 2019, a UK-based organization. And what that did was give us a very strong data science practice who were very skilled and equipped in the area of market intelligence and going through all that company information and financial information, as well as a very strong market intelligence platform called the IQBlade platform. And what this fundamentally enabled us to do was to work with the different sales teams within our organization, or with our technology suppliers, or with our customers, and create integrated data assets, segmented however it needed to be for the purposes of those activities by country, by technology segment, by industry segment, whatever it might be, and not just benefit from the rich amount of data that we had from a sales perspective. So obviously we have a wealth of information around who we've sold to in the Nordics, in healthcare, through which partners and which technologies, all this kind of great, this treasure trove of information. We're able to enrich that data with third-party data and open data sources to give us other indicators of growth and other trends and other patterns that we might be able to identify, to really make sure that we are amongst the first to be addressing areas of opportunity. And also if there's indicators that certain patterns result in spend tailing off in certain areas, that we're not chasing and investing too much of our time, resources and money trying to prospect in areas which ultimately will have diminishing returns that aren't going to give us that ROI. So this is a really strong investment for us, a great way of leveraging data, a real company asset of ours, to really try and move the needle in how we have a differentiated approach to our sales and marketing strategies, and by extension that of our vendors and our customers and the value we add to them. So moving on, efficient operations. Again, the challenge here to increase operational productivity, improve processes, improve customer experience, and reduce cost, which is a similar mantra to everybody, I suppose, when they look at their operations. And just to be clear, when I say reducing cost, I don't mean removing people. I mean removing the burden of repetitive, monotonous tasks from them wherever possible, so they can focus on higher value activities. So we did that by establishing a business process automation practice back in 2017. And their whole modus operandi, their whole purpose in life was to develop a framework for process improvement, to select the right technologies, and to be that interlock between the business and between operations and IT, with a view to adding value and automating where appropriate. So RPA was the primary technology that team works with, and we were able to do a few interesting things here. We're able to automate high volume and simple processes such as file downloads, which might be invoices, price files, any number of things there, to generate sales reports as part of an automated process rather than directing people to a queue for our financial analysts to work through, which takes time. Data extraction, triggering SAP extractions, executions based on rules, but also data comparison, so slightly more complex tasks. For example, we get a number of reports from our suppliers, and we're able to compare those reports to our own version of the truth, to look at mismatches in what they're seeing and what we're seeing, and these might be for the purposes of rebates or for for stock inquiries or for whatever it might be, and we're able to do this at an increased velocity now. So very, very valuable activity to be able to improve on that. And then, of course, as with every company of our size, we haven't just grown organically, we've also grown through acquisition in many cases and parts of our business. So while we wait for these systems to be integrated, we're able to use RPA as a fabric at the front end of things to really interact between these systems in moving information from one system to another, so that our employees and our staff aren't having to spend 10, 15, 20% of their time on each particular transactional process just moving data from one system to another. We're able to impact that here. So this was an invaluable exercise in something that we'd done where, yes, there were operational benefits, and I think we automated plus 6,000 tasks a month in terms of what we do across a vast cross-section of different activities, but we also found we were able to work with specific line of business owners, sales leads, etc., and really collaborate with them to understand where their challenges were, where the delays were, where the processes were too inefficient or resource hungry, and to create a number of small wins and small successes, which then get built on, success breeds success. Those individuals then re-engaged. They wanted more RPA within their business, and the word gets around, and we end up with a rich set of automations that we're delivering. So that was one area which is particularly impactful to us. And then on to retention. So this is a fascinating exercise, and for this we have to travel over the pond to our US corporate organization, and this is off the back of an exercise I was exposed to in a discussion that I'd had with one of our data analysts over in the US, as we were set with the task of understanding how we could reduce customer churn, in particular with our cloud business, which is typically subscription consumption-based products. So rather than throwing the problem over to the data analysts and just telling them to have at it in the traditional way, which takes a lot of time, a lot of resource, we thought we'd try and move the needle a little bit, be a bit more innovative around how we approach it. And we partnered with a company called Able AI, which, as well as a wealth of experience and knowledge and skills, brought a platform. I think the platform is called the Able AI platform, which fundamentally provides a number of different views of how you work with data, one being a data science workbench tool, enabling you to leverage AutoML and work across a number of different machine learning models, and the other being more of an AI-enhanced business intelligence tool, which is for the business executives to be able to understand the outcomes, the predictions, the inferences being made by the platform, and also fine-tune some of those parameters to do what-if analysis, across the different scenarios that they're looking at. So fascinating project. We started just thinking, okay, let's just do like a pro-bit analysis, looking at 0-1, a 0-1 binary analysis of churn, 0 being they're not going to churn, 1 being they're going to churn, and try and understand who we think is going to churn this month, so we can start to reach out to them and put some activities in place to try and make sure we're retaining their business. So it's a little bit of a short-sighted view. By the point you're at the month where they're looking like they're going to churn, there's maybe less that you can do to try and influence them to rebuild that business back up with you. So there was I suppose, revised hypothesis by the business that using these advanced tools that we were working with Able, we might be able to be a bit more predictive. We might be able to get some idea as to who's going to churn 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 months out, and get a predictive model in place with the intention of mitigating that slippage of revenue and that churn over time. So there was a suspicion that one of the indicators that a customer might churn well ahead of them actually doing so would be to look at something called ARPU. So that's the average revenue per user. It's kind of the gold standard for companies that have consumption-based build products to look at the profitability of a customer. And the suspicion was that if we were starting to see a slip in the average revenue per user over time, there might be certain patterns in that data, especially en masse across a large sample of data, to indicate that they were at risk of churning. So that's all well and good, and that was interesting. But one of the other things that was done, which I found fascinating, rather than taking the traditional data science approach of finding the best model to explain all the data, what we were able to do as an organization was to say, okay, we're going to make these predictions of churn, and these predictions will ultimately drive an action to reach out to that customer or to not reach out to that customer. And typically, when you're looking at machine learning, the model that's selected, the model you're going to use, is the one with the best accuracy. But what we were able to do here was to add a few other dimensions into that model selection, which would trigger the action that we would or wouldn't do, which effectively by adding a few other dimensions around the business impact, a function around business impact into the efficient frontier of the model to say, okay, if we have one prediction that says that the customer is, that we should reach out to that customer and try and retain them, what's the cost of and then another that says it has a different outcome, a different inference. Let's make the selection on the recommended action based on which model, based on the business impact. So the cost benefit. So if it's going to cost $1 to reach out to a bunch of customers, and it's going to return $2, then great, we should be doing that. But ultimately, if the average revenue per user, across those customers is not significant, and it's going to cost us a significant amount of money to reach out and put those activities into play to look to retain them, then maybe we shouldn't do that. So we're able to temper the right model to work with based on the business impact of the prediction that we would work with to trigger the action or to not trigger the action. As well as doing this, because of the interlock between the data science workbench tool and also the BI tool, which is able to call upon these models which had already been run and fine-tune certain parameters and certain values around what was influencing the model selection and what was influencing an outcome, we could allow business executives to do that what-if analysis, fundamentally meaning that we're not putting a load. One of the things that I was hearing is that 20-30% of many data analysts' time is just spent doing what-if scenarios, which we're now able to give them back in terms of time, leveraging tools like this to allow business executives some degree of self-service with AI. So a few things here. Unexpected insight. We were able to follow the data down a rabbit hole and find some really interesting rabbits, but some outcomes and some answers which helped us kind of revise our hypotheses and even our problem statement to a degree to realize we could do more, which was really interesting. We were able to kind of take the fact that traditional data analysts will typically find a model that they're comfortable with using to explain the data that they're looking at, which might be one of a few models that they use. But it introduces a certain amount of data analyst bias into the process. That might not be the best model to explain all of the data, maybe just 50% of it, maybe less, maybe more. In using AutoML in this way and in modifying the efficient frontier of the way that we select those models, we're able to completely remove that bias, which meant that we had a much more unbiased view of the recommended activity. And also, the platform incorporates a high degree of explainability, so we're able to see why this model had won out over another, and then the business could take a view on whether they felt that justified the action that was being recommended to reach out and start those retention activities or not. But also, we were able to move from a less predictive approach to trying to identify customers churning in month to a more predictive approach to try and reach out to them 3 to 6 months in advance. By doing that, we're not just reducing customer churn, we're also potentially retaining all of that business, that average revenue per user that might have been slipping over the course of those 3 to 6 months leading up to them churning. So it really enabled us to do more than just retain customers, it enabled us to retain revenue, which we might not otherwise have been able to do. So fascinating exercise, and this has generated a number of different threads and activities and ideas around projects that can bleed out from this. Really, really interesting. So some lessons that we learned: implementing AI should be a collaboration between the business and data specialists. Don't just let the data team run off and try and create projects for the sake of it. Talk to the business, understand the problems, build those small wins which you can build upon, and start to change that culture across the business. Don't be afraid to challenge the hypothesis that the business had in the first place and revise the problem statement based on following some of that data. And make AI accessible to the business. So, finding ways of involving business execs and sales leaders and line of business owners in the process of these projects is important, but also giving them access to tools that don't just kind of consume data and allow them to see outcomes, also allow them to have a degree of self-service around AI, really provides an empowering environment for them to work within, and really helps them have high impact decisions, and ultimately that culture in terms of the business wanting more AI in their process and in their day starts to really proliferate. So that's all I really have time to talk about today. We do have a technology in practice session. I'd encourage you to visit that. Our very own Chris Garvey will be talking about how we're using IBM Cloud Pak for Data to virtualize multiple data sources and then provide those further insights from that data, alongside Philippe Gregoire, who is the data and AI consultant from IBM that we work with. And we'd love to hear from you, so please stay in touch. Any questions, anything you'd like to understand more about, please reach out to either myself or Chris Garvey or Michael Moberg from the local team there. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to hear from you soon.